levels of incarceration in our various countries, or the situations that we have been in some way, or in one way or other, interacted with, align with the 17 UN SDGs. But before that, I want to allow each one present in this auditorium to seize a moment and understand from the experiences that are going to be shared. Some are lived experiences because we have folks that work within the criminal justice system. Through rehabilitation, their lives change, and they are back in the community, supporting the community and uplifting the lives of the citizens. Prevention of crime and prevention of recidivism through their direct engagement with the communities.
My name is Damien from Sydney, Australia, and I was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Had no idea about the prison system before I went in, and so I had this idea in my head that I'm like, well, I just finished my undergraduate degree, and I thought, well, I'll go into prison and it'll be an environment where I can start a master's degree. And I learned pretty quickly that there was almost no education available in the Australian prison system. There was pretty much, they had basic literacy, but very little beyond that.
My name is Tyrone Wade, and I just finished serving 24.5 years in an American prison, in a few different American prisons. As far as the bad, I would just say that I had entered at 16 years old, and it's just excessive. Pretty horrendous experience. As far as good, hope, I think. And we get that. I got that from a lot of people in this room, Charlie, and a lot of others. There's people in here I've seen your faces and names and newsletters over years, and yeah, that gives you hope.
At times I found it's entirely alienating. When they let me out of the high security units, I was in a cold sweat. I had my friends around me, and I could not cope with even the communication of people who loved me and put their arms around me. I found it enormously psychologically scarring.
My name is Francis Wayne, and I'm from the U.S., but I live here in Kenya, South Coast, Mombasa. Early in my life, I became an active alcoholic, and then a drug addict. And so as an alcoholic, I went to jail many times. The hardest thing about prison was just living with anxiousness and anticipation that something could happen at any time.
My name is Heidi Cerneka. I'm here from the United States. I work on the border between the United States and Mexico, and so right now I work with people that are detained simply because they asked for asylum.
I've been in prison for 20 years, and I've come here to tell you that the conditions in prison, especially in Kenya, are not pleasant because people are not treated well.
I'm currently completing a PhD which aims to make mental health treatment available in Australian prisons. We don't have mental health treatment at the moment, which is really terrible.
I am the National Prison Chaplain in the government system. I'm also the coordinator of the Restorative Justice and Peace Building. I'm here to learn and also share the experiences we have in Malawi.
My name is John Clark from near Washington, D.C. in the U.S. I was a prison officer and a prison warden, so I spent much of my life trying to make prisons more humane.
I am happy to be here because I would love to share with you all the experiences of our women and also my experience working in the criminal justice system.
I was once in prison. I was convicted and sentenced to suffer death, and I stayed in prison for 12 years.
One time I was sentenced to 134 years in prison. People who are in prison really need you.
I'm Chaplain John Bosco from Tanzania. I have come here just to learn from you how you handle the matter of the prisoners in prisons.
I am here to learn from all of you, because criminal justice reform for Ethiopia is more or less a new topic that we really do not know a lot about, and we have not done so much on this regard.
My name is Franz Michael. I'm from the United States, Brooklyn, New York. I'm formerly incarcerated. I spent 15 years in federal prison. My first reason I'm here is because President Obama commuted my life sentence at the end of his presidency, but a son of Kenya sent me to Kenya. The second reason I'm here is because upon my release, I started an organization called Dream Deferred, and I work with formerly incarcerated men and women.
I'm the founder of a social enterprise called Clean Start Kenya. Being formerly imprisoned at Langata Women Maximum Prison, my brothers and sisters who have talked about the poverty, the injustices you find in prison is what pushed us as formerly imprisoned women to set up the organization.
To allow those voices to be heard. And the voices, the fact that they aren't heard now, and they can be, right, that's where the power lies. So the voices of those giving power to those people who are currently incarcerated.
I'm also honored to be leading an organization called the Formerly Incarcerated Convicted People and Families Movement. That's where the power lays in the U.S. People building and voting. And for so long, you know, the power has been against us. The thing is the mindset. The mindset of the fact that we have been put in our minds over and over and over again that we don't have power, but we do.
And speaking of empowerment, I believe that the most empowering thing that we can have is somebody that's in our corner. Having just one person that either believes in you or believes in your human potential. Having that brings hope. Care brings hope. Knowing you matter brings hope. And besides having people of empowerment, those people lead to tools of empowerment. And the greatest tool of empowerment, I believe, is education.
Don't be afraid or say that that person is from prison, he has never changed. Just give him a try. Despite the fact that my family stood with me and the government, they gave me and some of my colleagues a place where we can restart our lives. I appreciate that.
Governments do not take care of inmates post imprisonment, and so I work for Clean Start, and at Clean Start, what we do is we ensure that women are economically empowered post imprisonment, and we are advocating that the policies that need to change are actually effected so that the women who are serving time have a safe landing.
Returning citizen. And I'm proud to say that that is a term, it's a term, that there's been an evolution that has taken place, you know, in America. You know, I remember when we were referring to ourselves as pips. You know, we don't call people prisoners. And anything that you see come out of the president's office now, for previous incarcerated people, will use strength-based terminology. You won't hear no more of that inmate stuff. All right, so that's where the language is. And language matters.
Main interventions that we've seen quite a number of results coming out of that.
I visited one of the biggest prisons in Rwanda. I entered the facility. I saw very long lines before an office. That office is for the psychologist. This prison with 18,000 inmates has one psychologist. He can't help more than 12 people a day. I realized this was a big problem.
This is a presentation on the rehabilitation and integration programs. We have our vision is to be a center of excellence in providing human rights-based correctional services. Our mission statement is to provide safe, secure, and humane custody.
In our organization is called the Ufulu Leadership Program. This particular program is our own creation, as an organization. This program, we aim for it to be an alternative for custodial sentencing for petty offenses in Africa. So we have managed to create awareness and advocate for the plight of these children. They also offer responsive caregiving and training programs to these particular women. For the 10 years that my colleague served prison, this woman kept going in and out of prison. In 2018, when our friend got in touch with Clean, she went through our program, we put her in a chapter, and she has never gone back to prison.
So whenever a child is caught doing some sort of offense, they are taken directly to the Waradan courts and they're detained there in the police stations for a certain amount of time. That also leaves girls very vulnerable who are under custody of the police for different victimization, abuse, and that also restricts their liberty and sexual harassment. Children who are brought directly to the courts have the right to be informed while they're brought to the court, and their parents or guardians are also have the right to be notified immediately.
Over the period of 75 years, now there are 33 offences in Pakistan which carries punishment. Even children have been sentenced to death in Pakistan for very first act for dealing with the children in conflict with the law. It is called the Juvenile Justice System Act 2018. Prior to 2018, Pakistan did not have any law, particularly dealing with the children in conflict with law. There is section 16 of this act that the children cannot be given death sentence. But the problem in Pakistan is that when a person who is less than 18 is charged with, say, like a murder, or charged with a robbery, or charged with blasphemy, they treat them as an adult. When they say that, they dismiss all the plea of juvenilities. In 20 prisons, we identified 127 children. And 125 children, particularly those who are likely to be sentenced to life. So there is a need of having a uniform definition of child in Pakistan in order to save them from gallows.
In 2005, the Roper versus Simmons, they got rid of the death penalty, recognizing that juvenile brain development was different than adults. And so, therefore, juveniles are less culpable than adults. The brain science shows that juveniles' brains aren't developed until around the age of 26. So that's a science that needs to be adopted internationally, and juveniles, at least up until 18, cannot be held to the same account as adults.
The Act set 3 criteria before the Juvenile Justice Board can decide to treat accused as an adult: mental and physical capacity, ability to understand the consequences and the circumstances of the offense. Prior to deciding the child should be tried as an adult, the Juvenile Justice Board must conduct a preliminary assessment based on the above criteria. Reasons behind juveniles crime in India. No one is born with potential to be a criminal. Circumstances have shaped them into who they are.
So current issues. One is over-policing, especially First Nations people and especially kids. The second is raising the age of youth detention from 10 to 14 years, which has been a current focus. The importance of bail laws in averting people entering the judicial system and therefore incarceration. Justice reinvestment is another area where investment, instead of going into more policing, more prison infrastructure, more money for prisons that just hold people longer, instead into community, into First Nations people because they're most affected, and to youth, and particularly First Nations youth. The Australian incarceration rate is 220 per 100,000. Kenya is 107. So we are the most incarcerating nation. Technology is actually should be considered a basic survival skill and essential to any employment ambitions that government has.
How does the system change? The justice system with death penalty, juvenile life sentences, or in prisons with overcrowded conditions, sometimes unsanitary conditions, lack of programs. Sometimes Society demands that things change. Do the prisons belong to the prison system, or does the prison belong to the community? Who's responsible for change?
And when we are talking about allies, we are looking at people who offer one another backing, assistance, advice, information, protection, and even friendship. They go the extra mile to help out. This is what exactly the reformers do. The reformers go an extra mile to help prisoners. And to facilitate the social rehabilitation and reformation of prisoners through specific training, to facilitate the reintegration of prisoners into their communities.
In 2009, I was arrested, I was convicted, and in 2012, I was sentenced.
When the judge passed a sentence of 7 years without an option of fine, I thought I was dreaming, and I accepted that I was going to prison. And that is the only way you can survive. I was confined in prison wherever I went. In prison, we made friends. I made friends with the wardens. We have access to almost all prisons in Kenya today as Clean Start, because we have taken prison officials to be our allies and not foes, because we have recognized that we are advocating for the same thing.
There are some principles that guide the Cuban prison system, declared in Article 34, that protect and promote the rights and guarantees that persons have. All programs are focused on creating or reinforcing ethical values to support the future social re-entry and coexistence. In 2009, after many dialogues between churches and the government, the authorities and the Cuban Council of Churches reached an agreement to establish an official and organized religious board inside the prisons.
One of the lessons I've learned in Malawi in the responsibility of managing inmates and prisons at national, regional, and individual level is that we officials in the government, in the prison system, do not work in isolation. We work with partners, reformers, and the decisions that we take and the manner in which prisons are managed are of great interest to many people far beyond and the narrow confines of the prison. Reformers and officials, there have been frictions, and there are frictions going on. The lack of information, reformers or those who advocate for change, they don't have adequate information in the way prisons are run. There is an abuse of prisoners sometimes. The reformers watch this, that this is unfair, why are you doing this? As officials, we overemphasize on security. In Malawi, the curriculum is designed in a way not to reform, but to ensure that an inmate or a citizen does not escape from the prison.
Faith-based rehabilitation immediately raises the idea of prisoners, right? Faith-based rehabilitation is also rehabilitation of prisoners.
If you consider section 401 of Pakistan Criminal Code 1898, it talks about remissions. If a prisoner who is not sentenced to death penalty or a capital offense, if he or she memorizes the wording of Quran, he may get remissions in sentence for 6 months to 2 years. And if you see the Constitution of Pakistan, there is an Article 45. The President of Pakistan commute any sentence given to any prisoner. The President of Pakistan only gives remissions if the prisoner is a Muslim. There is no procedure available in the criminal justice system of Pakistan which gives permission or liberty to Christians or to non-Muslims.
From all the directions, all the religions-based people can enter to the temple. It is not closed for anyone. Nobody is going to ask your religion, where from you have come, why you have come. It is open to all. This is one thing which we take upon. All the diseases in the body are eradicated by taking the name of God. This Allah, this God has created a light. The whole world of the nature, they are His men. From one light, the entire world has come to existence, who are good or who are bad.
Now, in its 75-year history,
Israel has only carried out one execution. Furthermore, no Jewish justice on the U.S. Supreme Court, and there have been quite a few, has ever supported the death penalty. Finally, in October of 2018, a madman entered a synagogue in the city of Pittsburgh and killed 11 people at a shooting at a synagogue called the Tree of Life. As the trial began, all of the relatives of the victims and some of the survivors, 6 of whom were shot and just injured, petitioned the state to not seek the death penalty unanimously. The reason, revenge is not a solution to crime and madness. The Lord beholds the earth from heaven. He hears the groans of the prisoners. He releases those condemned to death.
Even though they are inmates imprisoned, we still see the need for them to continue to share in breaking of bread, that is, in the celebration of the Holy Mass. We see many of them being touched, many being converted, but coming to prison, through our counseling and all that, they begin to have remorse for those that did wrong anyway, remorse for what they did, and then they begin to repent. And that shows that the Catholic Church, even in the prison there, is also growing. And because of the preaching we give them, to let them understand that they are not being rejected by God, even though they are in prison.
The Bible is our basis, where we use and take the message to share, rehabilitate and reform the inmates. The Christian faith has an emphasis on the spiritual aspect of the individual. That when the heart is right, and then things start standing and changing from inside out. And one of the emphasis is that it's not done as a hit and run operations, but it's done as an intentional, a planned, and a well-consistent planned move to see to it that the word sits down in the individual by means of discipleship.
I spent half of my life in prison, and I've been able to, since I've been released, see the needle start to move. But I can guarantee you that the needle is moving. The needle is moving. And just so happened in America, it's being led by formerly incarcerated citizens. Right now in the district government, there's probably more individuals formerly incarcerated employed in the district government as a direct result of legislation. A lot of it I've been involved with. We need to give hope and let people know that we know that you can turn this thing 100% around. Because if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. There's nothing wrong with being referred to as a human being, because that's who we are. Because one of the things we look at is how do we reduce our prison population. By 2000, over 10,000 DC residents were transferred to the BOP, the Bureau of Prisons. 10,000 transferred. In 2000, I'm here to report to you that right now there are only 2,600 DC residents in the federal system. You know, we have a whole list of proposed topics that, you know, we really need to start digging into. Digging into them, you know, again.
You're gonna host a further work, particularly the formerly incarcerated people.
One of the things we find is that when you're incarcerated, your choices are taken away from you. And so we want people to think and to make those choices and realize they have the power. The overwhelming feeling when people are going through our workshop is, it took me out of this place. I felt like I wasn't even in these walls anymore. It's all about, we're all teachers and we're all learners. It's not like we as outside people are above anybody else. We just bring the program in. What we found is that through brain science, you open up your brain. It expands to be open to what others are saying.
Some of the things that people have said to us is, you know, I want my life to be meaningful. And just because I'm stuck in here for the rest of my life doesn't mean I can't help somebody else. It doesn't mean I can't work on myself as a person.
We ask in Brazil with groups, what is justice? And when have you seen justice done in your life, in our courses? There may be one or two people who say, I've seen it done. And we try to bring about another model that is a model of just justice for everyone involved, whether it is the person harmed or the person accused of the harm, to meet the needs of people involved. And that's what restorative justice tries to do. We work with violence, and most of what we see in the news and most of what we deal with is interpersonal violence. In our courses and in our work, we work with the structural violences that are very present in Brazilian society, and our role as facilitators is to ask questions. Our role is not to tell people what to do.
There's a lot of stuff we already know that works, so why aren't we doing it? So that was my issue. Why do we know what's right, but we don't do it? We'd rather do what's counterproductive, what harms most people. Tough on crime really means let's be tough and punitive to people. When you got big divides of inferior, superior on gender, race, religion, you see these very punitive styles. I have a physical body, but I am more than my physical body.
And my client at the time was facing a murder charge. And one of the times we had in the prison, in the court, we were having a conversation, and he told me he had an exam to write the coming week. Is that the government does not make available provisional tutors, does not make available books. The libraries are nothing to write them about. You have to pay to get that textbook. And like, why does it have to be hard? If you really want to be a better, if you really want them to be a better person, then the resources should be on ground for them to explore. There's no way they can be better, there's no way they can be empowered if the resources are not on ground. There is no prison reform if there is no effective rehabilitation. Before you can talk about prison reform, then the resources need to be on ground. There's still so much need for educational support.
The question is, how do we calculate the efficiency of a prison? Is it just by the number of square meters available to the inmates, or is it in order to see what kind of service they provide? Now, you can understand that if you dedicate 13% of your staff and budget to the main aim of your institution, that won't work. Security personnel in Peru for 2022 had to work for 11 inmates each. But the treatment personnel had to work for 59 people. So one thing is to have the square meters, the other thing is to have the staff.
Juveniles should be separated from adults in all phases of the criminal justice process and should not receive death or life sentences.
I think we have to work on two levels: responding with social programs, visits, all that we are doing, but also doing advocacy to change the system. The more we put people in prison, the more violence we have. We don't want more prisons. We are advocating for not an alternative system, a new paradigm that restores people, responds to their necessities, and changes our society.
The only way to change them is through spiritual change. Somebody has to go there and talk to them.
Come on, 2 minutes. 2 minutes, we got a break from us. We coming back here at 1 o'clock, now 2, 1. We got 3 panels to get to, so please.
Okay, so I'm very short. I think we need to also do something about the curricula we have in our schools. We have a culture where criminals are looked at as, there is no dignity to the kind of treatment that they get. There is no humaneness to the kind of contact that they receive, even from lawyers. And I believe it's because of the culture that has been put in us through the education system. So if we address that, I believe that is going to really reform the criminal justice center.
Life-changing interventions are very necessary for prison interventions.
All human beings are valuable and they should not be trashed. They should be restored to being good community members. In D.C., an office to provide employment to returning citizens. And it's something that should be brought about in Kenya, it should be brought about in Brazil, it should be brought about everywhere.
Much more remains to be done to identify and address the pathway to women's incarceration to establish better, safer, and more gender-sensitive conditions for women prisoners to ameliorate the negative consequences of women's imprisonment and to reduce the number of women in prison around the world.
Currently fighting to give grace period for people that have been sentenced to finalize their affairs before they report to the prisons. Who would benefit from this is women that are currently pregnant, going through trial processes.
With women, right, we are caretakers. We want to be there for everybody. Everybody depends on us, but we don't practice self-care.
Women prisoners are minor offenders, mostly with no educational background.
We still have a lot of patriarchal influence. It is also related with the kind of crimes and offenses women committed.
The problem associated with Nigerian correctional facilities is that their prisons are designed for men.
From the moment you are arrested at the police station, that is where the problem starts. And from there, the police take advantage of them. And most of them do not know their rights.
Advocacy is anchored on utilizing your power to help those with less power. That whenever you want to do something, you don't come in guns blazing. If you don't articulate the issue, you would have a solution to your problem. So if you don't have clarity in your advocacy, then you get the wrong results.
That of the conditions of incarcerations must ensure the conditions should be humane enough in order for the humanness in them to be realized. As I thank you all, I believe that each one of us was able to meet our various expectations.
Human rights of incarcerated must be continually defended through advocacy, especially for those in detention and post-release.
All detainees have the human right to communicate with others through telecommunications, email, messaging and video calls.
We all praise you and thank you for everything because you are our God and in you we have prayed. Amen.
Amen.